I'm Brandon Amoroso, and this is the D2Z podcast, building and growing your business from a Gen Z perspective. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to D2Z, a podcast about using the Gen Z mindset to grow your business. I'm Gen Z entrepreneur Brandon Amoroso, founder and president of retention as a service agency, Electric. And today I'm talking with Jess Cervellon, former VP of customer experience at Feastables, and now a fractional CMO for a variety of e-commerce businesses. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. So as Brandon said, I previously was the former VP of customer experience at Feastables. I started that company. I was employee 4, so very well versed in like the creator world as well as like Gen Z businesses, audiences. And now I'm just helping other brands thrive as a fractional CMO and taking all of those learnings and making sure other people can build their businesses.
What was it like, being a part of a company as employee number 4 and then going through, the substantial growth that they've had since inception?
Yeah. The best way to describe it would be roller coaster, but the most exhilarating roller coaster ever. There's lots of like that, when you're on a roller coaster and you're like launching and you're going up, 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 and you're like, oh God, anticipation. And then you drop and then you're like, this is amazing. And then it's like constant, like up, 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 drop, not drop in a bad way, just like drop in like excitement. Yeah. It was really crazy because like, to be honest with you, like myself and the CEO and the COO, that was a part of it too. And those beginning stages, and even our CMO, like we didn't know what we didn't know. Like we knew what we knew about Mr. Beast. And we knew, and like for me, like I'm an experience girl. So like I'm looking at socials, I'm looking at community, I'm like researching the customer and like all these things. And I'm making like assumptions based off of like what we think we know about this customer. And then we just had to like make those assumptions, launch, and quickly pivot. And it was constantly like pivoting plans on a frequent basis. But it was that pivoting of plans on a frequent basis is like honestly what helped us grow so rapidly and so largely. You think one thing works and then you realize another thing, like for instance, launching with dark chocolate opposed to milk chocolate, like most kids don't like dark chocolate. So we like quickly pivoted and like, I wouldn't say pivoted, but like we quickly added additional SKUs to the business, right? Like based on like what we were learning about them. So like, it's just little things like that.
Yeah. That like ability to pivot rather quickly, I feel like is something that separates some of the more successful brands from those that aren't. But I feel like a lot of it is engendered by, the founding team and the culture that's created at the organization. Because there's places that don't necessarily reward that or look at that as a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, just to like piggyback on like what you're saying, like to be honest with you, since now because even before I had departed from Feastables, like I was working in like a lot of like fractional work and help in like consulting and advising other brands as well. And what I do notice is that a lot of people do like can do the things of like pivoting and like understanding like, okay, maybe this works, but then like we have to change it in 6 months and like can easily be flexible and adaptable. But you would be really surprised by like the operators and founders out there that like are not flexible and adaptable, which is really surprising to me because I'm just like, I just sometimes think like you can't, like not everything is going to go to plan. You might have this go-to-market strategy or you might have this revamped strategy, and what you think is not always going to work. And then like to keep hammering at it and spending the money on like, this is going to go, this is going to work. I'm like, my dudes, let's back up a second. let's realize there's a pivot. And I've actually run across like a lot of founders who are just like not willing to accept that.
Yeah, no, being on the agency side, we've definitely had to work through some of that for better or worse, where maybe something isn't working, but there's just a continual desire to keep pushing. And if you if you push hard enough, maybe it'll work. But that's not necessarily typically how it goes.
Right. I mean, absolutely. And I think even from like an agency perspective, I think we can both share in this, like from an agency or even fractional or whatever it is. Sometimes it's like you have a client and you can say like, okay, this is the best for your business. And I'm here's my expertise. Here's the case studies. But then sometimes like they just don't want to listen to you either.
Yes, that is, you know, it's a weird dynamic because in other cases, like we've had in the past where maybe we have a really great strategy or it's, you know, it's totally right, but it's not being presented in as confident enough of a manner, or it's almost being posed as like a, you know, like a question. But what the client's ultimately paying for is like expertise and guidance and advice. Um, and so that's been like a, you know, a learning process, you know, for myself when we first started, but also for educating and training the team on how to just handle, you know, the delicate client relationship balance.
Yeah.
Being forceful,
Yeah.
but not being, you know, too forceful, respecting their vision, the fact that it's their baby almost, well, depending on who you're working with and what size of company, but then still being able to push through your own like ideas and insights.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting dynamic, like going into like the consulting side of things versus like being like an FTE at a company, you
Yeah.
know?
What are you most excited for to not be an FTE anymore?
I don't know if it's necessarily like, because I don't want this to sound negative at all, but like I'm just a very community driven person and a very like empathetic leader. And so I really like helping people like a lot. And I think that when you are, you know, an FTE and like you're working full time for, you know, a company, you only like you get so wrapped up into those projects and it's really fun. Like I'm not saying it's not fun, right? You get wrapped up into like those projects and those mindsets and like that particular thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? But what I'm and like, you know, and that works for some people, but what I'm really excited about is like honestly helping brands, like multiple different types of brands. And always every day being a challenge. You know, like I think sometimes as you scale a company, and I say this all the time, like you might walk into the company and you're like, okay, type, I built this company, right? And you're like juggling like 50 different plates or tasks and all these things. And then you start bringing in more and more people and you hand off those tasks. And you hand off those tasks so you can go build other towers, right? Like other challenges and other things, right? But as you scale a business and when you become, you know, maybe not like the 0 to 50 miles per hour and like more of the 50 miles per hour to 100, you become so specialized in your role that you might not be doing things that are like outside of your general daily tasks,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I mean Feastables is actually like my fifth startup, so I've worked at plenty of startups to like realize like this is a trend as you scale a brand or a company. And so I think like the biggest thing that I'm excited about is like not just being specialized in one thing and being able to specialize in a multitude of different things and to constantly live in like a challenging environment while helping other people build their brand and their successes.
And what are some of the things that, you know, from a end product standpoint, or like when you're engaging with a brand, what is your, like, what are you typically engaging with them on? Is it, you know, more so brand strategy? Is it more tactical with, you know, e-commerce optimization? Is it sort of just everything and you help them fill in all the pieces?
Yeah, it honestly just really depends. I mean, like first and foremost, like I'm a customer experience and like brand experience type of person. So like, and I don't mean that from like a support perspective. Like, yes, the support is like a piece of it, but it's like the community side, the brand marketing side. Like, how do you like market your product to the masses? How do you get people to like, you know, not only aware but retain them? All of that, right? And so I think first and foremost is like definitely a piece of like the brand marketing and the brand experience building, like taking companies of like, I have this idea, but like one of my roles is fractional CMO, and like they have the idea and it's like on the market and it's really dope, but now we need to go build the awareness channels. So it's like paid and social media and like the community building things, right? And then there's other brands that I'm doing just straight email marketing because I love designing stuff. Like I love a good retention strategy. I love a good life cycle strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's pieces of that. So it's kind of like a mixed bag in a way of like not just, you know, the overall performance marketing and the growth marketing, but it's also a little bit of the retention and life cycle. And really at the heart of it all is about brand experience and really developing out like that brand story and that brand like want from the customer, right? Like that's really like the things that I love to do. So to answer your question in a short version, it's strategy and sometimes it's tact.
I think a lot of times brands go to the tactics before they figure out the strategy, which isn't a good thing either.
Yeah, I know. I think that goes back to like the pivoting, right? You're doing like the tactics and you're like, okay, this is working, but like, why am I not getting like the ROI or like the metrics on this? And then it's like, well, you got to pivot your strategy. Your strategy wasn't just like an A-B thing. Sometimes you got to go all the way to Z, You
mentioned community, and obviously Feastables has a massive personality, social influence, presence in Mr. Beast. What's it like building community for a brand that doesn't have that that person with the audience?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, like it comes down to obviously the awareness play. And I don't mean just like paid ads. Like, I mean, it's building out your social channels. Like Instagram, as much as like people hate the algorithm, Instagram is such like a place we have to be, right? TikTok is another place, so it's like really building out like that social media strategy. But it's not just, okay, I'm going to put out the content and I'm going to post consistently. It's also about being like engaging. It's about like being in the comment sections, being in the DMs, also going to other brands that might be like-minded or might have a like-minded audience and like commenting and being engaging in those paths. Like think like Wendy's and Slim Jim, because they do a really good job at like, it's not really just a social media strategy that they're doing. They're building community and they're building engagement. So it's like thinking like the Slim Jim and Wendy's people and like being in the comments section and like, meeting your customer where they are. And then on the other side of it too is like being in forums too. Like at Feastables, our audience was in Discord. So like we launched with a Discord. We launched with a like just in, I'm sure a lot of people know, but if you don't know, Discord is kind of like a Slack meets forum type of place, right? And it's a really like good community for like a lot of gamers, but like Gen Z, or if you have like any sort of like niche hobby, it's like kind of like meets Reddit. But anyway, so my point is though, is like we built at Feastables, like we knew our audience was in this channel. So we immediately built this channel. And we had, I think when we launched, maybe we had like 10,000 people in the Discord, something like crazy. It like grew really rapidly. And then it like has doubled since then. But it's building like these avenues for your audience to not only like talk about your product necessarily, but also to kind of maybe like have some sort of gamification, maybe have some sort of community with like amongst each other that have like-minded interest. It's not all about, being in Facebook or in the DM section. Sometimes it's like creating that space for your audience. And then lastly, sorry, I like rambled a little bit, but like lastly, the other, like another piece of building community and I think this is like a little bit missed, but is like email and SMS. Email and SMS don't always have to be a sales channel. They could just be a general engagement channel where you're like literally maybe sending a quiz to your customer, or your like Feastables does a really good job of this. Like we created interactive emails to get clicks, right? Like, and like people anticipate that, people love that. Like, so people are like clicking through these emails and doing these like really fun things. But we also launched with an SMS channel. Our text code was 69420. So yeah. So it was 69420, but like we weren't just using that channel as like BOGO deals, like buy one, get one free, right? It was like, hey, we were sending messages like, are you up? Like, let's have like a two-way conversation. I think that when you think of community, it's like, yes, it's social, but there's also that whole email and SMS side too, that you can like easily build your community without having to go through a full-on social media strategy.
Got it. No, that's all helpful. And I think the brands that have been most successful, at least I've seen, are the ones that have the founders who are willing to like step out there and create that social presence, or at least be present on the website and in the story, because it feels like, consumers are shopping and resonating more with individuals themselves than necessarily the brand. It's not like it's Nike or Adidas or something where they have that brand equity over the last 50 years. If you're launching a net new business, people are more so connecting and resonating to like the founder and their story than, the made up brand name that they've never even heard of before.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One more thing that I was going to say is like, I think a brand that does a really good job with like, developing out that brand story and like bringing their customer along with like that founder brand story is Fly by Jing. They do a lot of content, like even on just their website of like telling their story and like kind of like building like that community of like, this is why you want to purchase from us. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you think about it in like those terms, I'm trying to think of another one, but yeah, that's the last one that comes to my mind for now. There's plenty of them, but I was like,
I feel like a lot of the Asian food and drink
yeah,
companies do a good job. Like Imi is very founder led. There's the water company that I'm blanking on the name of, like Sanzo or something.
Sanzo, yeah. Sanzo's a good one too.
All very founder, Boxu, etc. So
yeah, but I think that's so important. Like that founder story is like the basis of where you should start,
Yeah.
Like, I think if you're a new brand and you're coming out and you're like, and nobody's ever seen you before, right? Like, I don't know, I'm like this cup, right? Nobody's ever seen, well, this is a brewmate, but let's pretend it's not a brewmate, but like, there's this cup, right? And like, nobody's ever seen me. And like, the market is competitive because Brewmate and Stanley are out there, right? Like, why, like, sharing that story about why you're launching and why your product is like not only like, okay, my product is so better, but like creating that storyline of like your entire brand, like the reason you made this change and you got this on the market is going to have more weight than if I was just like launching with like a general cup and I sold it into Target,
Yeah. What you mentioned actually, and I have another question for you based off what you just said, but you mentioned interactive emails. What software were you using for that?
Spellbound.
Okay.
Spellbound. Yeah, they like utilize like Enclavio and other tools and stuff, and like you can do some really fun stuff with it. So shout out to Spellbound. But I also think that like that interactivity, besides like just Spellbound though, like you can create, like if I look at just email and maybe you don't want to add another tool, right? You can create some sort of like flow process of and I mean, granted, this is like super scrappy, okay? Like some sort of flow process of like linking to like a quiz, or even like, hey, our customer support team answers back, right? Like, you can create like kind of like those two-way interactive like conversations in a very scrappy way with or without that tool setting. And the same thing with SMS, like you can create flows that like respond back based on like what a person answers with.
Yeah. The two-way nature of SMS is critical to having a successful program. And there's still some brands that will text me and I'll reply, and it's like, go email us to talk to us. I'm like, then why the hell are you texting me? That always drives me crazy.
Yeah, and I think you actually bring up a really good point. I think that's like the biggest thing to remember is like, if you're going to create these journeys for your customer, make sure your journey is not frictioned. So like what Brandon was describing is that I texted back, and then they were like, oh, if you have an inquiry, like email back. Well, I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Like, that sounds lame. Like now you're adding friction to the journey. So like if you're putting something out there and you're trying to develop a two-way conversation, like keep it in that channel as much as possible.
Yeah. That's one of my biggest pet peeves is that.
Yeah.
Going into retail, are you typically working with brands that have an e-com and retail presence, or more so e-com?
I mean, listen, like Feastables is like both e-com and retail. So like I definitely have experience in it and like that omni-channel approach. Definitely. But where like I really like to thrive is like honestly building that brand equity and that brand awareness and like building a brand from like in the e-com space. Then you go into Amazon and then you go into like retail. I actually do have a couple of like hydration companies that I work with that are in Target and Walmart. And we've done some like interesting things with gamification and like some marketing plays with them that have incorporated both e-commerce as well as the retail channels.
Got it. Yeah, that's a world that I don't really have to deal with, is the retail side of things. And it's like, do you go for retail sooner rather than later, or is it easier / better if you wait until you have more e-com penetration, so the product demand is sort of already obvious, and it's not as, it doesn't feel as scientific as as e-commerce, where you have very direct like inputs and outputs.
Yeah. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, I think it's all revenue focused, right? Like retail's going to drive awareness for you. Retail's going to also, if you're a good spot on the shelves and like all this stuff and like good advertising about it is going to give you good revenue. Right. But I think what happens and this is my own opinion. Okay. This is just my opinion. So any of the listeners out there, okay. I think that if you have a brand that's just like coming out into the market and like, let's say you're developing out that brand story, you're trying to get that brand equity, that awareness, all of those things, controlling it in the e-com environment first is going to help you build it. Like exactly what you were saying is that, it's going to help you build it so that when you go onto the shelves, you're going to have a little bit more of an awareness. And the thing is, and you also have to remember, it's like, okay, you're like, okay, sick. I'm an e-com brand. Oh, sick. Like a retailer wants to pick me up. Like that's really tight. But one of the things that you lose is you don't really get to talk to your customer anymore. So if you don't have good channels set up for like R&D or like information about like your household penetration or like repeat purchases, like at retail, you're going to lose that information. And then how are you going to like innovate your product even further, right? How are you going to continue to improve? So it's like, I think you have to think through, and I'm not saying like it's good or bad, right? I'm just thinking if like, you're an e-commerce brand and you're thinking about a retail channel, you have to think about the overall journey for your customer. So how are you going to go into retail and then bring them back to your website so they can still get your brand story, so they can like maybe make a bundle purchase or make more purchases and be more aware of like other SKUs you have available and also get it back into your list. It's like, it's the never ending cycle of first party data, and I mean, one of the things that we did at Feastables and I did specifically is that every bar had a QR code on it. And it used to be like, it was just a basic QR, like just like a list build thing. And I decided to be a little bit scrappy, like when we went into Walmart, because we were losing so much information. We had to go and purchase a lot of like info, right, from like these companies, right, these information companies, and I was just like, okay, well, how can I talk to our customer in like the most scrappy way? And so behind the QR code, I created a quiz, and I just used Typeform, and I just wanted to test out how many of our purchasers were actually in retail versus D2C. And what I found was the respondents of this survey that was just like asking about like their shelf experience, their in-store experience, like whatever it was, 80% of the people that responded were actually from Walmart. So like, that's how like I was able to like bring it back, right? Like bring it back of like understanding our customer. One thing you have to know, I'm not a legal person, is data privacy. So like, just because somebody responds to your survey does not mean they are opted into your list. Okay. So if you want to opt them in, you better make sure you have an opt-in question with the right compliance language. Do not come after me, lawyers.
All the legal stuff always has to ruin all the fun.
As always for a marketer, right?
Especially when, you're dealing with like alcohol in our case. There's like a whole host of other rules and regulations that have to be followed. And it's just crazy. There's a lot of red tape. So it can be pretty restrictive from like a marketing standpoint.
Yeah. No, I bet. I mean, like y'all and any sort of like CBD, any sort of like hemp products, marijuana, like any of that stuff. I know I'm just saying the same thing, hemp. CBD, marijuana. But like anything that's like regulated like that is just like, it can be fun, but it's like also no fun at the same time.
Yeah, well, it's not like spinning up a website to sell shoes or something. There's so
Right.
much more complexity that goes into it. So the barriers to entry are higher, which is a good thing, but it also can be a pain sometimes too.
Right. Right. But it's, listen, that's the fun part though, too.
Yes.
You know? And
Yes.
like, okay, I see you red tape. How am I going to bust through you?
With the guidance of legal, of course.
Yeah. Don't forget your legal team. Shout out to the lawyers.
Yes. You know, I it's completely unrelated to anything that we're talking about, but of all the lawyers I know, like Chat GPT is fascinating because they're all abusing the hell out of it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, yeah. Go ahead. So sorry. So sorry.
no, it's just it's just going to be interesting to see what happens. I think it'll be good in the long run if people who are starting, like, there's a lot of cost to starting a new business if with all the the red tape, all the documents that have to be filed, the contracts that have to get set up, et cetera, et cetera. If you could leverage AI, or there's some like sort of uniform, just like how Y Combinator has like your standard safe document that you can download and use, so that you don't have to pay a lawyer to get that going when you're early on in the startup phase of your business. I think it'll be good in the long run for opening up more opportunities for people to be able to start their own business and things like that.
No, absolutely. I think like even from like that standpoint, but also, um, images and, copy and like all the things that like, I don't want to say AI is coming for anybody's job because I feel like I will get burned at the stake for this, but I don't think AI is coming for anybody's job. Okay. I just think that like it is making people better, you
Yeah.
know?
Significantly more productive. The AI photo stuff is pretty cool though, where you can take like one photo and then cycle in and out a bunch of different product colors or people even.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, it's insane. Like it's an absolutely insane world. I mean, then you kind of like, it is an insane world, but then I think like what's going to be really interesting is like how we not necessarily regulate it, but like when we think about the ethics of it all, you know?
Well, I was reading an article like,
I
when
mean,
does an image stop being an image because you've doctored it up in so many different ways.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, like literally the other day, was doing a happy hour. I'm like planning a happy hour event, and I like needed an image of like an armadillo, and I was like able to go in and be like armadillo doing this, right? Like, and anyway, it was just like it's just so crazy. But I think what's going to be really interesting though is like the ethics piece of it, because there's also like voice AI. Like, haven't you seen like those like software tools where like people are taking celebrity voices and using that. Like I was watching a TikTok just the other day. Somebody like took Mr. Beast's voice and made an order with McDonald's for like 100 burgers.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, granted, it didn't really like super sound like him, but it definitely sounded like him. And it like said nobody like on the other end is going to be able to like distinguish,
Well, I listened to a AI like voice software negotiate with a collections company on behalf of a customer, pretending to be that person that was in collections, and it was wild. Like the back and forth, there was almost even like agitation in the voice of the AI towards the end of it, and then ultimately they like were able to get the the collection amount down significantly.
Yeah.
So like, how do you even know if you're talking to a real person anymore at a certain point?
Dude, I know. I think there was like on Instagram, I think it was Air HQ doing like a AI sales call, right? And like the person on the other line was getting agitated, and then like the AI voice was like recognizing that agitation, and then would respond back and be like, listen, like I completely understand, like this or that. but I'm just trying to help you, whatever. Right. And then it was a whole advertisement about how this AI voice like turned somebody around, like kept rebuttaling and turned them around to like actually like set up the demo call.
Mm-hmm. That's, I feel like it's just a start though. Like it's crazy how much further it can go. What are some of the like, things that you're using it for specifically within e-commerce?
I think ChatGPT, when it comes to copy, like I'm such a, and this is probably like a little bit of like a laziness. I'll be honest with you, but like I operate only on like 110% all the time. So like, meaning like I'm super like a perfectionist. Right. And so it's like, if I'm doing a post or if I'm like building copy for like a PDP, right? And I run into like writer's block, I'll turn to ChatGPT to help me with like, here's the description of this, or can you make this better? Like maybe I'll have like the basics of what I want to like write about, and then I have it make it better. And then like, I don't think it's 100%. I'm going to be honest with you, because like, I think that it doesn't have all of the personality and it doesn't learn the true personality. But I think what it does help you with when it comes to copy is like, all right, what is like elongating a paragraph or a sentence, right? Like, how can I make this a little bit better? And then, so it's like helpful in those terms.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just like the biggest thing that I use it for, is like mostly just ChatGPT. And then also, and then I can do this in ChatGPT too, but like sometimes coding, right? Like when I'm like I wouldn't say setting up a Shopify site, like, because I don't do that, but I'll like do maintenance things, right? And a lot of times, like, maybe there's like liquid code that I need to do for an image or a form or something on a website, right? And maybe I don't know HTML like the back of my hand. Like, it used to be gone are the days where I would open a book and like figure it out. I can go to ChatGPT and like get coding, dev code to like be able to like manipulate liquid Shopify code. So copy, code, and then lastly, I make a lot of like very scrappy reports when it comes to like marketing analytics or CX analytics or any of the like anything where we want to like get a scope of like where the business is, and you have like tools that live in all these different places. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll utilize ChatGPT for like formula stuff too.
Got it. Okay.
Look at me. Not taking my job though.
Not yet. Still far away from that. I feel like there's a lot that could be done though with AI in, personalization of the customer experience, because all these platforms like Klaviyo, for example, have so much data, and it feels like we're doing so much still that's manual in terms of choosing the segments, choosing, send times, choosing the actual copy and creative that does get sent to those segments, versus them telling the brand, Brandon signed up for 30 other Klaviyo lists, and this is the type of stuff that he responds to best. We're going to just take over from here because we know he needs to get, X, Y, and Z email at these times after his first purchase to be most likely to place that second order. Whereas still today we're making a lot of assumptions and doing tests, but it's testing against cohorts versus doing one-to-one like personalization.
Yeah. I think there's definitely stuff that's coming out that's going to help in like those types of things. Cause like even Recart has something in their like SMS platform where they utilize AI and AI copy to say like, I want to send this to a VIP customer versus I want to send this to like a first time buyer, right? And like changes the copy. So maybe you're saying like happy holidays, here's a BOGO deal, and we'll help you in like changing that copy, but then also like does a little bit of identification of like who those people are too. So I think everybody has like a version of something and I think that we're going to see even more innovations in it in the next like year.
What's one area that you think is currently being underserved that you'd be excited if, somebody came out with a solution for it?
Honestly, I really think it's what you were mentioning, like the marketing piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that we can go deeper than just making copy. And I think we can go deeper than just making segments even. I think we can like identify behaviors as well as like help marketing analytics and like making better decisions based off of like AI models that from like an analytics point of view, not just like oh, go do this for me. Right.
Yeah.
I think it's even taking a step further of like what you were saying. Like, and I think I see a lot of people doing these things, even like in retention or life cycle. And like everybody has some sort of tooling for it, but there's not one tool that answers it all. And I think that there should be like, I wish that whether it's like Klaviyo or SendLane or any of these like marketing tools that we utilize for sends has something all encompassing into their analytics, because that's like one place. In all of these sending tools, the analytics are shit. This is why I go and like build my own dashboards.
And also the attribution windows. The attribution windows are hysterical too.
Yeah. Oh man. And even like, but I think they're hysterical because they also compare you to like benchmarks of like your industry standard. But I'm like, not every fucking brand. Sorry.
No, this is a casual podcast. We can swear here.
Yeah. Here's Jess's hot take. Okay. Benchmarks that you give me that are based off of like what you think, right? Like whatever for these tools, right? What you think that like an apparel industry or a CPG or whatever it is should be in is not always going to be relevant to me. Mm-hmm. It's not like, and I think, so yeah. So like going back to what you're saying, like the attribution rates, like all these things, like I think that like a lot of these models that these analytics these tools have in their analytics are so in left field most of the time. And I'm like, I don't trust anything you're saying to me because I'm like, are you taking into account that like, you know, maybe the person like, yeah, they did go to checkout, but maybe they left. Yeah. Right. And then maybe they went to another window. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how do you really know? Like, are you really tracking their behaviors?
And if you added up the revenue from all of your various tools, your store would be like 3 to 5 times larger than what it actually is.
Dude, straight up. And this is literally why I go and build my scrappy reports, because I'm like, I don't believe you.
What does that reporting process look like?
Oh, a lot of Google Sheets, a lot of Excel docs. It's downloading this in CSVs to then making like, not just like pivot tables, making crazy graphs, like just taking this to go do this and like the craziest like formulas ever. But hey, man, shout out to Chat GPT, because before this year, I was not an Excel master.
And now you are
a girl over here.
That's awesome. Yeah, making everybody better. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I know we're running up on time here, but if there's one like tip or trick that you would recommend to brands, you know, for next year that they should be looking at, what would you say?
Yeah, I think honestly, land the plane of like everything that we've talked about. I think it's really focusing on like your community building and your brand story, and really doubling down on like the customers that you do have. And I don't mean it in like, okay, just a retention basis. I also mean that in like, if somebody is excited about you and your audience, really engage with them, really build community with them. Mm-hmm. Because those are the people who, when you go into retail, when you go into Amazon, you go into all these places, are going to continue following your journey.
Oh, that makes sense. Well, if I ever start a brand, I'm going to reach out to you. But honestly, it sounds awful with all the operational logistics stuff. So I'm going to stay on the marketing side over here.
I will say, I know we're at time, but like when you're starting a brand, I have come across a couple of like really cool tools and like, I wouldn't say agencies, but like operations that help you with like all encompassing of like fulfillment. If you need to go get a formula out there, whatever it is, right? So there's people out there is my point. So if you ever, Brandon, want to start a brand in 3 years, dog, call your girl.
I will. Well, before we hop off, can you let everybody know where they can find you online?
Yeah, so 2 places. I'm most active on LinkedIn. So Jess Cervellon, we'll put in the show notes on how to spell my last name. And I also have a website, jesscervellon.com. Those are the 2 places that you can find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. For everybody listening, as always, this is Brandon Amoroso. You can find me at brandonamoroso.com and electricmarketing.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.